Good afternoon, everyone. Somewhere between the start of this sentence, or maybe Rick clapping his hands, and right now, a researcher typed a question into an AI system. They didn't search a database, they didn't browse a journal, they didn't follow a citation link. They asked a machine, and the machine answered. Was that answer right? Was it drawn from your content? Did it cite your journal? Did anyone pay for it? And more importantly, does it matter to the researcher either way? The honest answer is we don't know. And that uncertainty, that not knowing, is why I'm here. I'm at Carnegie Mellon, the university where AI was born as an academic discipline and which has led its development for the past 7 decades. I also work as a professional futurist. Over the last couple of years, I've built a framework for thinking systematically about where all of this is going. For libraries, for universities, for everyone whose mission is connected to the integrity of knowledge, even publishers. Today, I want to share that framework with you, tell you what we found, and outline what has changed since we first published it. The instinct for all of us when disruption arrives is to forecast, to find the trend line, to extend it, to model it, to project. That's understandable. Forecasting is a serious discipline. It works beautifully when cause and effect are clear, when systems are relatively stable, and when the future is more or less a predictable extension of the present. But think about trying to do that for air passenger traffic in the middle of, let's say, 2019. You've got 10 years of pretty much straight-line incremental growth data. You forecast into the future, but things then change. What we're living through right now is not a stable situation. AI's trajectory is complex, genuinely complex in the technical sense, but it's also shaped by regulatory choices yet to be made, by business models that are still struggling to find their form, and by geopolitical tensions and competition that is unresolved. And the pace of technological change makes last year's assumptions look quaint. In conditions like these, forecasting doesn't just fail to help. It can actively mislead. It gives the impression of certainty when none exists. It narrows attention precisely when you need to be looking wide. The right tool for complex, high uncertainty problems isn't a forecast. It's scenario planning. And the difference matters as a practical tool for leadership. Forecasting answers questions. Scenario planning helps you ask better ones. Jim Dator was a futurist at the University of Hawaii who spent decades thinking seriously about how we imagine what comes next. One of his many useful quotes is on the screen, and I think about this one a lot. Scenarios don't predict, they prepare. They describe divergent but plausible futures, not to tell you with certainty which one is coming, but to stress test your assumptions, surface your blind spots, and help you make decisions that are robust across more than one possible world. The approach was pioneered at Shell in the 1970s. It helped them anticipate oil price shocks that caught almost everyone completely off guard. I interned at Shell in the 1980s and learned a lot about scenario planning there. And since then, it has become a core tool of strategic leadership across many sectors. In 2023, I was part of a team appointed by the Association of Research Libraries and the Coalition of Networked Information to develop 4 scenarios for AI in 2035. We focused on the research and knowledge ecosystem, how knowledge is created, certified, shared, and used. More than 300 people across North American research universities contributed to our discovery work. And after the scenarios were published, I wrote a practical toolkit on how to use them in leadership settings. Let me walk you through what we found and tell you what it looks like from where we're standing now. The fundamental idea behind scenario planning is captured in this image. It's what futurists call the cone of possibility. We can, as I've mentioned already, forecast from the present point. Just take a straight line growth from where we have arrived to at this present point. But the further you project into the future, the wider the range of plausible outcomes. Certainty is greater the closer you are to the present time. But by the time you're looking 10 or 20 years ahead, you're genuinely in a territory where multiple possible futures exist. Scenarios occupy different points within that cone. Each is internally consistent, grounded in real trends and real uncertainties. Again, none of these is a prediction, and none is presented as more likely than any other. What matters most in scenario planning is this. You don't choose your favorite scenario and plan for it. You hold all of them simultaneously and ask, what would we do if this world arrived? And the next one, and the one after that. The strategies that survive that exercise tend to be very robust. The 4 scenarios that we developed in the ARL C&I toolkit are structured around 2 critical uncertainties, the 2 factors that we spent 2 days workshopping to identify as being highly uncertain and highly consequential. The first is societal intentionality about AI. On the one end of the spectrum, AI development is one that is deliberate, values-driven, and anticipatory. It's been designed with care about consequences. On the other, we find development that is reactive, ad hoc, market-driven, responding to what's possible than what's desirable. And the second is societal adaptation to AI. On the one hand, extensive, deep, broad adaptation that reshapes institutions and practices. It truly transforms the way we live our lives. But on the other end, it's a limited, fragmented, uneven world. It might be significant in some areas, but barely present in others. And in typical 2x2 fashion, what we did was took those 2 uncertainties and created a 2x2 matrix to generate 4 distinct futures, 4 genuinely different worlds. When we published this work in June of 2024, all 4 were considered equally plausible and equally deserving of serious strategic attention. I'll give you my interpretation of how well they stood up over the past 20 months or so in just a moment. But let me walk through each of the scenarios briefly to give you a sense of what those different worlds could look like. In this first scenario, AI and human capability integrate successfully, responsibly designed, governed by shared values, and accessible across society rather than concentrated in a few hands. In this world, research becomes radically interdisciplinary. The barriers that have always slowed knowledge from crossing between fields, different vocabularies, different methods, different publication ecosystems, dissolve. Grand challenges get tackled at a pace and at a scale that was previously unimaginable. Here, knowledge flows openly. The open access trajectory that many in this room have been pursuing for the past couple of decades reaches something close to completion. For publishers, this is the scenario where your value proposition is clearest and where your current business model also is most disrupted. Access friction dissolves, but trust, quality, and editorial rigor become enormously valuable. The information environment is richer, faster, and more complex than it has ever been. Readers, both human and AI, need reliable signals about what is credible. The publishers who thrive in this world are those who have invested in being a mark of quality, not those whose value rested primarily on controlling access. For librarians, this is in many ways the most comfortable scenario, the one that we've been building towards for a long time. Open access is achieved. AI genuinely democratizes research capability. The library is a navigator, a curator, and a trusted guide in a rich and complex information landscape. But there is real risk here. Because this future rhymes so closely with your existing values, it is easy to assume that it is also the most likely. It is not. It is the future that requires the most deliberate work to reach, sustained advocacy, coalition building, and institutional investment in the AI literacy and governance capacity that makes responsible integration possible. The question that this scenario puts to everyone in this room is a simple one. Are you positioned as a quality signal or as a gatekeeper? In the second scenario, AI's greatest impact falls on consumer markets. entertainment, social media, consumer education, lifestyle. The deep infrastructure of research appears largely unchanged. Journals still exist, peer review still functions, but the systems that matter, discovery, access, reach, have been quietly captured by platform intermediaries. The old forms survive, but the old powers do not. Elite research universities form tight alliances with Google, Microsoft, and their successors, but everyone else negotiates from a position of weakness. For publishers, this is a world of uncomfortable but unavoidable choices. Your content reaches readers via platform intermediaries you do not control. Your discoverability depends on deals struck at a level above your pay grade. Journal brands still matter, but only if they're visible on the right platform, indexed by the right algorithm, surfaced by the right AI. For librarians, platform dominance breaks the equity promise. The researcher at a well-funded institution and one at a smaller college are no longer reading the same literature. The question is not whether to engage with major platforms, but rather it's on whose terms. And in this scenario, the terms are set by the platforms, not by us. The third scenario is the one I want to spend a little bit of time on because it's the one that I think we are edging towards at the moment. In this world, AI adoption accelerates everywhere, and governance fails to keep pace. Development is rapid and reckless. Bias gets baked into systems at scale. Regulation arrives late, panicked, and inconsistent, different in every jurisdiction, never quite addressing the actual problem. The information environment is polluted, misinformation proliferates, and public trust erodes. And here's the paradox for publishers. This is the scenario where the value of peer review is the highest, because readers are desperate for something they can trust. Some signal that what they are reading has been checked by someone with deep expertise. The scholarly imprimatur matters enormously in a world full of plausible-sounding nonsense. But it's also the scenario where your infrastructure is most under attack. Training data litigation still has not been resolved. Your content is being scraped at scale, and I can tell you from the research library world, our digital platforms are being scraped at scale as well. Predatory journals are multiplying, and under the cover of AI, they now appear more plausible than they ever were. For librarians, our users can't tell what is real. Information literacy has never mattered more, nor has it been more underfunded. This is not a hypothetical. Several features of scenario 3 are already visible. We're not watching from outside wondering what this world might feel like. We are already living in it. The fourth scenario is the one that forces the most fundamental questions. By 2035 in this world, AI is not just a tool, it's a collaborator, and in some domains a principal investigator. It generates hypotheses, it designs experiments, it synthesizes literature with a breadth and speed that no human can match. In this scenario, the Nobel Prize Committee, it is suggested, might face genuinely difficult questions about attribution or whether the prize could be awarded to an AI platform. The scholarly record fragments. Some content is written by humans, for humans to read. Some is generated by AI systems and consumed by other AI systems. And some exists at the interface, human questions with AI synthesis, human interpretation with AI verification. For publishers, this raises the most uncomfortable question. If the primary consumer of the content you publish is an AI system that synthesizes it, summarizes it, and delivers an answer to a human who never sees the original, what does that mean for your access model? What does it mean for peer review as a human process, for the notion of a journal issue, for author incentives, for the entire structure of how scholarly communication works, and for the entire academic career progression structure? And for librarians, if AI produces and consumes most scholarly knowledge, the library becomes an institution that preserves the human layer of content. That is not a small role, but it's a very different one from that we inhabit today. we need to think about who is our reader. Now, these are not rhetorical questions, they are strategic questions that define the decade ahead. So in June 2024, we developed 4 equally plausible scenarios. Now in February 2026, we need to understand what has shifted. The first thing to say is that AI has entered the discovery stack, not hypothetically, not as a pilot project, but at scale. Most researchers that I talk with on my campus begin their search with Perplexity or ChatGPT or Gemini or fill in the next from a long list of LLM platforms. And they're using those to find and synthesize literature. They're asking a question and receiving an answer. The answer cites sources sometimes. They're even real sometimes. It attributes content sometimes, but your DOI may not appear. Your journal title may never be mentioned. The answer is delivered, the researcher moves on, and your journal's contribution to that moment is invisible. That is, I think, scenario 4 arriving early. It's not fully the way that we wrote it, but there are some unmistakable characteristics. The second thing that has moved on since the scenarios were published is the governance picture, and I do think we need to understand what's happening there. The EU AI Act has come into force, a serious, ambitious attempt to regulate a technology that is developing faster than most regulatory frameworks can track. It's a meaningful step towards scenario 1. But in the United States, federal AI governance has retreated sharply. There had been attempts to develop a framework for responsible AI development that has been unwound. And in the UK, I think there's kind of a non-statutory, non-regulatory approach to try and do something, and the government will tell us at some point. They've got other things on their mind at the moment. This combination, the significant regulatory effort in some jurisdictions, deliberate withdrawal in others, is precisely the fragmented and inconsistent picture that is described in scenario 3. The third thing, and I say this as someone who works with researchers every day, is that academic integrity is under more pressure than ever before. Not because researchers are becoming less ethical, but because the tools available for generating plausible-sounding scholarly work have outpaced the systems we built to verify and certify it. My sense is that we're living in a combination of scenarios 3 and 4, chaotic governance and rapidly advancing autonomy, at the same time. These 2 scenarios in combination are not a comfortable place to be. They pull us in different directions and create pressures that neither alone would generate. And it makes the strategic choices over the next couple of years more consequential than we might have anticipated. Rather than summarize the scenarios one more time, I want to leave you with 3 questions that I think are worth genuine strategic attention. Not as a rhetorical provocation, Rick will get to that with the debate later, but as actual working questions for your leadership teams. Where does discovery happen for your readers and researchers today? This is not about where you publish, not where you index, but where researchers actually find things. The moment of encounter between their having a question and their receiving a piece of knowledge. If the honest answer is increasingly in an AI interface, what follows from that? What does that mean about how and where you invest, what you build, and who you partner with? Secondly, what happens to your content after it's published? Do you know, not in principle, but in practice? Is it being synthesized, scraped, embedded in training data sets, cited accurately or inaccurately? The relationship between a publisher and a piece of content does not end at the moment of publication. It now extends into systems that you don't control in ways that none of us fully understand. And what does peer review mean when an AI system can read your entire archive faster than a reviewer can read a single article? This is not a hypothetical, it's happening. The question is not whether AI will be part of the verification process. It already is informally in the academy. The question is whether we design that participation deliberately with values, with transparency, with safeguards, or whether we allow it to happen and manage the consequences afterwards. After the scenarios were published, I developed a practical toolkit to help leadership teams across many sectors move from "this is an interesting read" to "this is our strategy." It's structured in the 5 modules on the bold lettering above the rainbow-ish set of triangles. And it's designed to take a team from understanding these scenarios through to building a series of strategic options for the near term that are robust for the long term. I've run 2-day workshops online and in person around North America, the Middle East, and in Asia. And if anybody wants to chat about the toolkit or the workshops, happy to talk about that later. The researchers who built the internet in the 1970s were not building it for Amazon. The scholars who established peer review in the 17th century were not building it for an era of large language models. Every system we rely on was designed for a world that no longer exists by people who were trying to solve the problems of their moment as well as they could with what they had. They succeeded, but then the world changed. I'm not criticizing what was built, but it's an observation about what building means. The question today is not whether AI will change scholarly communication, because it already is. The question is, which version of that change are we building? And are we making those choices consciously with intention and care, or by default, by omission, by leaving decisions to whoever moves fastest, without first asking whether speed is the right value? The scenarios that we publish don't give us the answers, but they give us better questions and the time to ask them seriously. This present moment used to be the unimaginable future. What we do in it is up to us. Thank you. So I've tried to be honest about where I think we are. I'm curious about, in this post-lunch setting, what resonates for people in this room? What would you like to push back on? What would you like to understand more about? We've got a few minutes for that discussion, and people with microphones.
Do you think the dynamic in China changes it much? Because there wasn't. I think it's changed the publishing landscape substantially for a long time. But their use of AI, it certainly messes with the whole open access aspect of it. I'd be interested in your thoughts about how China fits into all this.
Sorry, how?
Well, like how China messes with your scenarios.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. You know, what we're seeing is almost, I think, a new type of arms race, that China and the US are the 2 countries that are developing large-scale LLMs. As I said earlier, I work on a campus with deep AI research knowledge. My colleagues will tell you that DeepSeek is a much better model on many fronts than any of the US models. If you accept that, and I've done some work to verify some of that, what you see is a world in which a country that people in the West don't often want to team up with could be controlling the best tech stack. So you've got that aspect, unquestionably. There are then questions about China's role in the scientific research process and rumors or policies around China withholding content to publish locally and perhaps not make that widely available. It's a very turbulent time. I think the important thing is, at least I'm in the UK saying this, not to ignore China, but to reach out, build alliances, build research partnerships, so that we view the world as a whole and not as a battle between different nations. I hope I don't get stopped at the border when I go home tomorrow.
Hello, Tiberius Silna from SKS Knowledge Services. If the Turing test have been passed by machines. If you agree with this, or if you disagree, just please comment. What is the next big test that you envision for the future?
I was part of a debate on this question last week. I'm told that I can confidently insist that the Turing test has not fully been passed yet. There are lots of debates about whether it's going to be next year, the next 5 years, or never. So watch this space. And in the meantime, we can think about the really interesting question, what comes after the Turing test? Thanks.
Mark Allen, Independent. Thank you, Keith, for that. You mentioned robust strategies towards the end, which is something that I've always latched onto in scenario planning. And I think of those as strategies which will allow you or your organization to realize your mission, regardless of which quadrant you land in. And therefore, those are the things you should do, because the future, as you say, is clearly unknown. And I was thinking what some of those might be, whether it's protecting journal brands, whether it's staying close to policymakers, whether it's investment in technology, whatever it might be. From the work you've done, have you thought about what some of those robust strategies might be?
Sure. So I've run a lot of workshops for libraries and groups of libraries, and the robust strategy almost always, across every scenario, across every workshop, is about reskilling and retraining our staff or hiring new types of staff. There's usually a second one which I worry about getting too obsessed with, which is about essentially getting our catalogue records into AI systems. Make of that what you wish. I have done one project for a big publishing-ish company. And I don't want to say too much because it was under an NDA, but I think it was about that sense of we are going to be subject to bigger AI systems than any of us will ever scale to meet. And therefore, we need to build alliances with one or more AI companies because they will be developing the infrastructure upon which we can build. But also, they are the future distributors of content. Okay, one more question. I think there was one down here.
Hi, I'm David Haber with the American Society for Microbiology. You mentioned the value of speed, and is that in conflict by nature with the values of science?
I think it can be, because at the moment, if we just let the pace of technological change unfold as rapidly as it has been, without seeking to protect the integrity of the systems that we value, we risk a disruption that we can never recover from. And that's why I think this notion, as I just said, of publishers working with AI companies, we need science also to have those conversations, to understand our values. At my university, we developed the Open Forum for AI, which has brought together a coalition of AI companies, other tech companies, universities, research funders, foundations, to have exactly those conversations. We recognize that many AI companies are for-profit enterprises. We can't and shouldn't disrupt what they're doing, but we want them to be in a conversation with us to understand the risks to society if they don't take account of our deep-rooted structures and values. The good news is that they are very receptive to those conversations. A lot of our work is being published, and I'm confident that we will continue to see a partnership emerge rather than either our communities being ignored or there being unhealthy conflict and competition.
Thanks very
Thank
much,
you, Rick.
Keith.
Thank you.
Round of applause for Keith.